Hi, welcome to part 2 of the professional development series. Last week we talked about some of the concerns and kind of philosophy behind professional development. And this week we're going to be looking at setting up parameters or setting up the process from the very beginning. Once again, building a professional system, because I'm definitely a believer in systems, making it easier for you and your staff to achieve your goals. So it's not something that you have to reinvent all the time. It's a system that already exists. And some kind of practical considerations, things that you might need to think about or do before you first meet with, and then during the process, and then evaluating the things that you need to think about when you're engaging in professional development with other people. So before the first meeting, I think it's always a good idea to take a minute and establish the expectations that you have on your part. So what do you want to do? Why are you doing this? Taking a minute to think about, why are you actually doing this? Is there a reason that you're doing this? Do you have to do this? Do you think it's a best practice? Somebody above you has told you you have to, like a program director. It's nice to know what the expectations are. I would hope that you're doing it voluntarily. I would hope that you are doing it because you see the need for it in order to support ourselves and change institutions in order to have better teaching practices. I do think that there should be some kind of orientation to the process, and I think by making it formal, at least thinking about it before you do an orientation, that can really help, because you have now engaged in planning and foresight. So it's not just you show up ready to talk to people without putting any thought into it. Those things don't go well. This lecture, this PowerPoint, the words that I'm saying did not just spring out of my mind one day. I had to sit down, I had to look at multiple sources, I had to use my own professional experience to write PowerPoints. Then I needed to think about how I was going to provide examples, metaphors in a classroom environment, how we would be doing active learning, because unfortunately that's difficult to do in an online space, but how we could actively learn and put into practice this work. And then finally, I need to set up a time in order to record it as well. And I need to make sure that, when I first started doing this, lighting was a concern. I'm literally sitting in front of a window with a lamp on my face because looking back at my older videos, you could hardly see my face. I'm not sure if you want to see my face. I hope that it adds something that I'm a real person trying to kind of talk to you about this stuff. But that's just an example of the fact that work goes into this lecture that you are watching right now. And same thing with professional development. There has to be some planning and foresight, and this goes into training any of your staff, doing staff meetings. Anytime you're talking to a group of people, you should probably have an idea what you're going to say. This doesn't typically include like a walkthrough that you do on a daily basis where you're just saying hi and greeting the staff in the classrooms. But any other time when they're out of the classroom and they're engaging in training or professional development, there needs to be some foresight. Typically, you might have a goal or a purpose that you're working towards, maybe a really macro goal for your own center. Why are you doing professional development? What do you want your teachers to get out of it? How do you want teaching practice to improve? How do you want education for children to improve? You can't get nitty gritty because you don't know how this is actually going to turn out. You don't know how the teachers are going to reflect with you and make goals together, but you probably have a general sense of you're doing professional development because you want education to be better in this way. It also goes back to the philosophy of your center. If you're academic, if you're Reggio, whatever, Montessori, whatever kind of grand philosophy you have that you're trying to put into practice with children, that might also be reflected in the purpose and goals and why you do professional development. I think it's really important to create a list of expectations and conduct that's mutually agreed upon. So these are my expectations. These are the teacher's expectations. So I'm going to be on time. I'm going to attempt to listen to you. I am going to have an open mind. I'm going to put this into practice, and then conduct. We're going to speak respectfully. We're going to talk to each other kindly and nicely. I'm going to check my emails on this day. Things will be turned in by this day. So whatever it is that you and the person that you're doing professional development with come up with, it should be written down. And I do think that it should be signed, because I think when you put some kind of thought and signatures behind something, it makes it a little bit more real. Same with nominal monetary rewards. or any kind of reward for doing this as well, even if it's a certificate or a staff night out or a backyard barbecue or bonuses, anything like that. It is really fantastic to do that kind of rewards because that has the person buy in. Same with when they feel that they've mutually agreed upon something and they're now part of the process. They also buy into the process of professional development. Also before the meeting, I think what you would like for your teachers to be able to tell you by the end of the first meeting, and so you're going to have to reflect on this a little bit before you go in, is why are we doing this? And that on my first meeting with somebody, that's what we are working on. We're working on our list of expectations and our list of conduct, which we sign, and then why are we doing this? And I want you to be able to write it and say it as well. It's really important that you can articulate it to me and to other people. And it's very specific to the individual. Everybody's reasons as a mentor, supervisor, as a learner, a protege, or an employee, whatever role you feel like you're taking, being able to say why you are doing this is really important. And for some staff, it's because there's a bonus, and that's totally fine with me. You know, that's not the reason that I'm doing it typically. But if that's why, you need to start with their honest reason why. Hopefully by the end of professional development, they've bought in emotionally or they've bought in professionally as well. And that's going to be part of your work doing is why should you do that? But I think honesty about why you're doing this is really important as well. I think a mentor supervisor also needs to answer it, especially if it's coming from an outside organization or somebody above you in the chain of command. You're still committing time out of your workday, which it can be significant. We always have too many things to do. Working with children, we have too many parents, too many children, too many staff, too many leaky roofs, too many budgets that need to be gone over, too much food to order. There's a lot to do. So you are committing time out of those other tasks. Typically, there's some kind of money as well. It might be a really small amount of money, but some part of your budget is probably going towards professional development and resources. Resources for teachers coming out of the classroom, resources for teachers to use as they improve their practice. Typically, materials need to be used as well, crayon, new earphones for the listening area, like whatever the teacher is kind of saying, you sometimes have to back up with materials as well to help them change their teaching practice. So you are committing to that. And if it comes from somebody else, you should still have a buy-in as well. Why are you doing this? Hopefully, talking through it last week, you saw the reasons why it can be important and it can help you and it can change things. And doing this is a great way to make a change in your program. But you also need to reflect on your own self. Maybe that's not the reason that you do it. Maybe you want to have an easier time with staff who maybe have really big personalities, and you need to have a better way to work with them because right now everybody's just butting heads. The employee learner should also be able to do this. And once again, it's going to be very applicable to that individual, to their lives, to their workplace, to their personality, to their teaching practice. So somebody who's really new to teaching, who has a chaotic home life or doesn't feel secure in their workplace is going to have a really different reason for engaging in personal reflection and in professional development compared to somebody who's been doing this for 10 years, whose home life is really settled, who doesn't have a lot of stress on their plate, and feels that they are a part of their workplace and they love coming to work. Those two different reasons why they're doing this are going to be really, really different, and you need to value and start from where they are. So start with the first year teacher where they are. Don't expect them to be an experienced teacher, and don't expect an experienced teacher who maybe has lost the spark to have the same passion that a first year teacher might have. Same on page 43 of our textbook, there's a lot more work on this as well, so that might be a great resource for you as well. I think you should also, before the first meeting, do some information gathering. So if you are doing it as a mentor coming into a place that's not your workplace, or if you're a supervisor, just kind of thinking about who are my learners? Actually, how many of them are there? How many people have been designated as the mentors? Is there a mismatch? Is it a good mismatch? Maybe sometimes having conflicting ideas, but people have been known to be very respectful about that, will be great. They'll challenge each other. Some people love challenge. Some people love to be a sounding board, to talk through things. They don't mind if there's differences in opinion. So that may be a great mismatch. Sometimes for some people who are maybe quieter, shyer, slow to warm up temperaments, they don't need that. They need a very nurturing, hand-holding, social and emotional person. So if you have a plethora of mentors and a plethora of learners, this is going to be much easier for you because you can try to link people in with the appropriate resources and appropriate mentor. We do this a lot with children. We think of what a child needs from another person, from a teacher, and we try to get a match between the learner, between the child and the teacher. Consider it the same way with this. So before you do it, if you have that luxury, or if you can stop midway through and reassign people to mentors and learners, maybe that will also help from the beginning as well. Sometimes in our programs, we don't have that luxury. It's just you or it's just one other person, and you just kind of have to divide it over the middle. Or, you know, I know that I work really well with this person and you work really well with that person. And you just kind of divide into teams, like A-B teams. You know, that's fine too, but I would think about the personalities and the temperaments and how these people are learning and where they are in their teaching journey, teaching stages as well. What are some of their needs and interests as well? So you might even try to do it by a team. So if their interests are in the Reggio Emilia approach, which is a very specific approach to education, they might all want to be in a Reggio professional development group with a mentor who could really support that. Like Professor Green at Mount San Jacinto is known for her Reggio. She's even gone to Italy where this originated. So she would be a fantastic mentor for people because she's such an expert in this field. I really like Reggio and I do have an interest in it, but I'm definitely not as qualified as her. So being able to see that there was a need and interest, and if somebody like that was available, that would be a fantastic mentor for this group of people. Then what are their challenges as well? What are the vulnerabilities in the classroom management, dealing with special needs, or differing abilities, or new and fresh art ideas? Like what are the things that they need to work on, and how can the mentor or a group of other learners support them? And then once again, we started out at the beginning of the semester, what kind of supervisor are you? So knowing if you're pace setting, somebody who has very, very high standards and isn't afraid to let other people know about it, what is your learner like? Are they gonna like thrive under that? I do really, really well with pace setters. I really like people who have very high standards because I do as well. And I can also have a lot of social and emotional intelligence. So I can sometimes be a bridge between a pace setter and people who might feel a little bit scared about the intensity of a pace setter. So see what kind of supervisor you are, how you work with your other supervisors, and how you work with your teachers. That might really play into it as well. I've talked about the stages of teachers before, and I want to touch back onto it because I do think it's a really important thing for us to understand. And it is going to be part of some online work that you're going to do as well. So our stages for teacher development are very similar to our stages of child development as well. So in child development, we have some theorists named Jean Piaget, Erik Erikson, and they have stage theory for social emotional development, and they also have it for cognitive development. This is a similar stage of development. We haven't split it into cognitive or social and emotional, but we just kind of have some ways that teachers are starting to evolve their practice. So over here, we have the very first one, which is the novice on the left-hand side, and that's following context-free rules. So they understand rules. Go outside at 9, come back in at 10, lunch is at 12, get up at 3, whatever it is, they understand those rules. They really need to have their time in the classroom. So they don't need time coming out to work on things. They need as much time as possible in the classroom to gain experience with children and parents. Some of that might be with other people who have more experience and can model how to be a teacher. So they can model how to work with a child who's having some challenging behaviors. They can work with parents who have been known, can see you working with parents who have been known to have issues or maybe are not the most kind. So a parent who's angry, how do you deal with that? They do typically have some inflexibility because they are learning rules, they're learning experience, they're learning children, they're learning parents, they're learning classroom management, they're learning lesson planning, they're learning how to do activities, they're learning how to supervise, they're learning how to do family style dining. I can go on and on and on all day with the things that we expect in a classroom. And in your first year, you go home exhausted because you have to do all of those things every single day with many children. So they can be somewhat inflexible. It's very difficult when you're learning things to also have the flexibility and also have the context to understand that you can do things and adjust things differently. So sometimes in our first year, a vulnerability of a novice might be that they don't feel like they can meet the needs of all of the learners in their classrooms because people learn a lot of different ways. That's a bit more of a advanced technique when with working with children. So as a professional development mentor, you might then see that the novice needs support in understanding how different children learn. They also need pedagogical training as well, which is kind of the science and work of teaching. So it's basically how we teach teaching. So they need work in that as well. They need to learn the theoretical reasons why we work with children. And that's why we have certain child development units. This is a child development unit that you need for licensing. That's probably why you're taking this class. You're going to use this professionally. You need it for a permit in order to teach at a preschool, an infant toddler, or an after school program. They have if they're teaching in the classroom by themselves, they should have a standard amount of units. So they've learned something about children, but now they need to put it into practice. They need to put that teaching into practice. They also need to learn facts and features of situations as well. So they need to be able to know things about children, know things about your center, know things about the practical aspects of teaching so that they then can put it into different types of situations and learn not to be so inflexible. We also need to have, after this one, we have the advanced beginner stage. They meld book knowledge with on-the-job experience. So they've learned a lot, hopefully in child development classes like this, in educational classes. And then they've had more years in the classroom. So this is not their first year. It's maybe not even their second. It might be their third, something like that. But they're still somewhat new. That's why I like the idea of the advanced beginner. There are some different names that we could give these, but I do like this because I think it shows you the progression really well in the words that they choose. So an advanced beginner, still a beginner, but they're not a total novice. So they're a bit beyond that. They've learned some episodic knowledge as well. So they've seen a child with challenging behaviors. They've seen a child with a differing ability, like a speech delay or Down syndrome. They've seen how they act in a classroom and the support that they might need from a teacher. They still might be fairly inflexible as well, though. They're still putting all of this on the job, all this theoretical underpinning, all this episodic knowledge into practice. And that means that they're still often quite rules, and that's typically an area that we target with professional development in order to help them be able to help all learners and make judgment calls about what families and children need. They're putting some knowledge into being able to guide their behavior in the classroom and also being able to guide the children's behavior as well. So they're thinking about management of a classroom. They're able to step a little bit outside of themselves and see what a classroom is doing, what the children are doing, and make some kind of changes in that as well. But that's also another area where they might just be developing it. And so professional development can come in and support that by modeling or teaching or supporting as well. Competence. So competent, have a couple years under your belt. You've been in the classroom, you've got some experience, you've got some education, you're putting both of those into practice. In this case, it's great. They have a bit more opportunity to and ability to articulate to families, articulate to parents, and articulate to other people in the community what their goals are, what the goals of the classroom are, what the goals of the children are, what the goals of themselves are to their supervisor as well. So they're not just in the thick of it. Like sometimes a cook, when they're having a really bad, a chef like in a restaurant are having a really bad night, they'll say that they're in the weeds. So they're stuck, it's hard to get out of, they're just doing the next thing that's in front of them. There's no kind of outside vision. It's just chop this, saute this, put this on a plate, get it out. Next thing, chop, salad, steak, out, you know, something like that. So this competent teacher is out of the weeds. So they're chopping, they're sauteing, they're feeling good about all of the orders that are coming in, they're getting things out fast, things are happening, they have some experience, they're not in the weeds anymore. So they can look up and they can see some goals. Whereas our novice and our advanced beginner, that's really hard for them to do, and that's where the mentors step in. So in this case, because they're not in the weeds anymore, they have the ability to make conscious choices, and they can explain their rationale for their behaviors. So I did this with this parent because I felt that he or she was upset about this specific thing. Maybe it wasn't the right decision, maybe it made the parent a little bit more angry, but at least they had a rationale for it and they can articulate to somebody else. It wasn't like they were inflexible and they were so real oriented that they couldn't help or support a parent because they couldn't step out of the weeds. They also have a better time of setting priorities. So in a day, you can only achieve a certain amount of things. What are their priorities? What is the most important that they do for the children in that day? What other things can be on the back burner? They also have various means to achieve ends. So they have more tools in their tool belt. A novice and an advanced beginner have learned a lot of things, but they have to put it into practice. So in this case, they have tools in their tool belt, they have experience, they've gone to workshops, they've learned active learning, they've seen some children with special needs. They've done all of these things, so when a new situation arises, they can rifle through their toolbox or their toolkit and say, this is what's gonna work in this situation. So they're not in the weeds, they're able to look up and see what's going on. They also have a sense of personal agency as well. They don't need to ask for every single thing. They know what they're allowed to do in a classroom, what they're not allowed to do, what supervision should look like, what lesson planning is. So they have some agency when it comes to their own classroom. Activities, lesson plans, they feel like they have some control. They have support when they need, but they have a lot of control over what happens in their classroom, and they relish that role. This is my classroom. I love my classroom. I love my kids. This is what I do to make it better. Then we have proficient, so probably a couple more years after competent. So once again, they have a large body of knowledge from classes like this or from workshops, conferences, and they also have a lot of experience in the classroom. So some of the great things that they can do are they have a really kind of intuitive or a higher sense of patterns. So they can see patterns developing either with the children, patterns of challenging behavior, or they can also see some patterns within themselves or other teachers or with parents and see those start to recognize and either change them and try to shift them or allow them if they're good patterns as well. So I would consider a great professional development system to be somewhat of a pattern. People start to engage in it and you can see it kind of happening and you can see the steps that it's going to go to as well. So that would be a great thing we want to keep going. But sometimes with challenging behaviors, we've engaged in a pattern of challenging behaviors. The teacher is supporting the challenging behavior unknowingly. And the child is engaging in it because they're getting something out of it. A proficient teacher can come in and they can try to change the challenging behavior because they have the ability to see those types of patterns. They're a bit more holistic as well in how they see the classroom, a lot of how they see the parents and the child as well. So they see the child as a whole and the family and the community as a whole as well. They don't just see what they see in the classroom, they see how the outside, the community, the neighborhood, the stress, the socioeconomic status, all those things can affect a family and a child as well. And they try to help children who have been identified as needing more support as well. Typically, the actions that they do, they have a lot of deliberation and analysis. So they can articulate why they did it. It's typically a fairly good decision as well because they've spent some time deliberating, they've looked at both situations, and then they've made a critical analysis decision based on all the facts, experience, and knowledge that they have as well. So that's typically a proficient teacher, a couple years under their belt. Then we have an expert as well. So an expert is great at putting in systems or routines. I like the word systems, that's typically what I use, but it's kind of the sense that it's automatic. So So having a system for classroom management or having a system for lesson planning, knowing where you go on Pinterest, knowing what your lesson plans are going to look like. Having done, having hatched chicks before for a classroom in spring, you did that last year, you feel pretty good about it. There's routines, you know how many times you have to turn the eggs, once you have 15 chicks in your playground space, the farmer that you can give them to, because you don't want 15 chickens running around with 15 preschoolers. That might be chaos, and you don't want the chicken getting in the classroom. If you've ever been to the lab school over at San Jacinto, there is a little chicken that runs around sometimes or tries to sneak in the classroom. So they need to be outside, but an expert teacher feels like that's something that they could do. They could engage in that type of stuff, or cooking or woodworking, or really high level activities are typically in a proficient and an expert, and not off to the left, that novice and advanced beginner. They really need to stick to the basics, the things that we know children like and respond to. No shame in that. If that's where you're at, stick with what you know, stick with simple, whereas an expert has routines and they can do many more things in a classroom as well. They do need to stay inspired and have that passion. Sometimes with experts, they don't feel they've lost that link. It's a hard job and it's grinding day after day, 40 hours a week, every week, only 2 hours. Only 2 weeks of vacation, maybe a year, hopefully more than that. If they're an expert, hopefully you're in a situation where you can offer more of a reward as far as vacation and sick time to reward them for being in your program for that long. But they can lose some of that passion and then that inspiration. So they have the ability in their routines, and they have ability in their understanding of children to engage in really, really high level classroom work with children. But if they don't have that social and emotional aspect of feeling inspired, then professional development needs to reignite that with them. They also are much more flexible. They see that children are their own people. They see that each child is different and unique. Each parent, each community is as well. And what's good for the goose isn't always good for the gander. What's good for one child might not work for the other. What one parent loves is not what the other one loves as well. So they can see the opportunity, they can see the changes, they can see the individual and respond in a flexible manner. Whereas a novice and advanced beginner, who once again is in the weeds, and is learning technique, knowledge, and understanding and education about children, doesn't have that ability yet. They also see that there are multiple dimensions. So if you've done any of the classes that have to do with sociology, socialization, and Grafenbrenner's theories, you can see the multidimensional sense of how do we socialize children? How do children learn? You can see it from a much grander scale as well. Also within this, knowing the stage that your teacher is in is very much a part of information gathering. They might be transitioning out of novice into experienced beginner. There can be those transition moments, but knowing generally what stage your teacher's in is a great process of information gathering, so that you can be the person that teacher needs. You wouldn't work with a novice expecting them to be an expert. That's a huge mismatch. They're never going to be an expert, or they're going to be an expert, but not for many years. And that would be really frustrating for that novice to be being told things that they're not going to use, because they need more knowledge, they need more modeling, they need more support, they need different things than the expert. And that can be really frustrating for somebody who's in professional development if they're not getting, or other people don't understand what stage they're in. Another part of information gathering is setting up a survey or a structured interview. So asking the same questions of all of your mentors, or doing it in a survey. If you don't have a lot of time, you can send out a free SurveyMonkey email to everybody. Or you can ask surveys, or have them take a questionnaire to see what stage they think they're in. So you might think they're an advanced beginner, but maybe they feel like they're a novice. That would be really interesting information to have. They see themselves lower than what you see them. So maybe you showing, hey, you're doing all of these great things. You're out of the novice, you're rocking and rolling. That might be a really positive experience for them to see all of the great things that they're doing, and give them a little bit of a confidence boost. Vice versa, I've also had people who think that they're maybe competent, and I see them as a novice. So I see that you need to go back and you need to relearn some of that basic knowledge about children. So maybe you only have your 4 classes in child development, that's not really that much. Maybe you didn't internalize a lot of it, and we need to go back and we need to learn about the basic theories of child development so that you can help children more. And I can see from there that we have differences in where we think we are, and that we might need to do a little bit more education together. You can also allow it to unfold naturally. So when you're actually meeting with people and learning about them, you can also use it as a conversation. So asking them questions about who they are, what they do. I'm a faculty mentor at Cal State San Marcos, where I work as well. And in my first one, I just like, who are you? Where do you live? How many kids do you have? You're first generation college student. Tell me about that. Do you like Cal State San Marcos? Do you not like Cal State San Marcos? Are you able to get books? Oh, parking's so terrible and it's so expensive, you know, so that type of stuff. And that really gives me a sense of who the student is and where we're going to go from there. After that, I do ask some more pointed questions, but I really want them to feel comfortable about me. And then I do more of a structured type thing just so that I know that we're on the same page. That's a very different situation, though. It is a form of mentorship, but it is a volunteer position, and we're primarily designed to provide social and emotional support for first generation students who might feel a little bit overwhelmed when they are first transferring or in their first year of college. You might want to keep this information indexed somewhere or safe, like so it's not just on your desk. Anybody can flip through it, and you wouldn't want to drag somebody if you're writing it out either. You wouldn't want to say how terrible they are. But you, like a therapist or a counselor, somebody who works with people, writing down and having some kind of book like this where you can kind of keep a sense of the work that you're doing with people is really, really important. You don't want to confuse people, especially if you have a lot of people that you're supervising. So keep an ongoing notebook with the work that we did and next steps. So I have mine for my Cal State San Marcos faculty mentorship. So I have a couple of things that we're going to do next time. Let's see if you can see that. It's our goal planning workshop. Worksheet. So 3 goals that we'd like to achieve by the time this person graduates, which will be next year. I know that one of them is going to be the credential, but what does she need to do before she gets into the credential program? She's got to take the MCAT or the CBEST, and then she has 2 goals you'd like to achieve by the end of the semester. We've done this before, and it was always like get an A or B in class, that type of stuff. Then I also just have a notebook that I keep for her, and I have things like on 10-7, we were just discussing gerontology. That was a possible field that she was thinking about going into. And I said that I would look up pay grades for social workers who engage in gerontology, because it is a concern when you're leaving college and you're leaving with some type of loans to make sure that an entry-level position is going to be able to pay bills. And in this case, this woman is a single mom, so she has kids to think about as well. And so making sure that when she graduates, she can take care of her kids, take care of herself and her student loans as well. So making sure that that's a field that's going to be viable for her. I have the experience and I have the understanding, and I also have a network to support that. So I can research, and then I can call up a friend of mine who works in the county and be like, hey, if I have a friend who graduates and wants to get into gerontology, is that a good paying field or not? And then I can get back to her. So I'm not really, I know personally, since I'm only mentoring one person right now, I know just in my mind where she is as a student. I know the struggles that she's having, the vulnerabilities she's having, and the strengths. She has a lot of strengths as well. So I just kind of have it in my mind, but I'm also really, really trying to keep track of the work that I need to be doing and the work that she needs to be doing and how we can support each other as well. But if you had 40 or 50 people, let's say, hopefully not, but if you were trying to be more of a mentor or professional support for all of your staff, you might need to keep a better tracking system for all of them. How can you get to know each other? Typically in groups as well. You might divide them into teams that are learning together, or you might start out with a larger group of people and then divide off into your mentoring pairs or groups. But I do like to have people work and divide into pairs. I'm not the biggest fan of icebreakers. Sometimes if we're working on team building, I have some funny like team building games we can work together where, you know, they're just kind of funny things, you know, where and I'll post some of them at a later date. But I typically like to engage or work in something with a purpose. Just the icebreakers, or go around and tell the group about yourself, doesn't really kind of foster groups or sharing. I think typically if you can work on something or something with purpose, that can be really, really helpful for people as well. And that can be something physical, working on the classroom in something, or it can be learning something new. So sometimes in those situations, I'll put little like online quizzes that like Kahoot that you might do online in a classroom like this, but I will do it for the entire group. And it's really fun as well. And you can do it anonymously. So like especially on Kahoot or Quiz, it has like you can do it anonymously, and it'll have like little avatars. So you can be like the happy puppy or the sad panda, something like that. So nobody's called out specifically as an individual, but when people win, you can be like, yay, happy panda won. And it might be a way for you to refresh something about Piaget or Erikson. Make sure that everybody has that understanding of child development, that underpinning that structures how we work in classrooms. So making sure that if one person was really struggling with it, you can typically know who the avatar is when they sign up. Sometimes it'll show you, it won't show the rest of the group, but it might show the teacher person who's structuring the quiz, who that person is. And privately, in a quiet moment, you might be able to talk to them about this or make it part of the professional development. Also, as you're getting to know each other, roles, expectations, and that signed conduct and that signed mutually agreed upon expectations and conduct is so important. So for work systems, employees are going to try to support the needs of other employees, and they're going to try to use some mentoring and coaching techniques, but it's going to be the employer that sets the stage. So they're going to be the ones that are going to structure these types of things if it's part of your employee-employer relationship. And so you're going to have to explain the roles and expectations as well. And if it's professional development that's going to happen outside of the chain of command, also explain that. Like we're getting a team of mentors, or we're linking you within a resource of coaching, something like that. So once again, matching the needs. So we've talked about mismatches and how some mismatches can be great. If they like conflict or they like talking out loud, that can be fantastic. If not, you might need to match somebody and how they learn with somebody who can really help and facilitate that. But also matching the needs of what knowledge or support does the learner need. And so I was explaining in my mentor relationship, she needs a lot of support with, you know, is she going to get a master's degree? Is she going to get a teaching credential? Is she just going to go straight into working? What knowledge does she need about those paths? How much money they make? How much time it is? What resources does she need? So she needs that from me. And I'm good at that because I work in this field. I have some resources. I have some networks. And she's busy studying. So that is something that I can help her with. But with that as well, we might also, with teachers, what support do they need? If they're a novice, what do they need to get more experience? What do they need to apply knowledge in the classroom? How can we connect, expand, and learn, and not just put it on the learner, not you need to get better, you're a novice, I need you to be experienced beginner by next month. No, how are you going to connect the learning? How are you going to expand it to be better for the children? And how are we going to learn more about child development together? I think observation is really important. Sorry, I'm drinking my La Croix today. I've got a sore throat. So as far as observation, I think that they're strengthened by observing teachers working. I don't really think that you can mentor, coach, or have a supervisory relationship without seeing how they are in the classroom with children and with parents. It can be informal. It can be just your daily walkthrough, chatting with the kids, sitting down, having breakfast with the toddlers, out on the playground, something like that. And you just get a chance informally to see how they work with other people, how they work with children and with families as well. Or it can be formal. you know, sometime in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to come through. This is the checklist that I have. These are the things that I'm working on. This is what I'd like to see. Or it can be video recorded as well. You can put a video recording system up in the classroom, or you can do it yourself. I've had that done a lot. It's very, very hard, but it's very, very helpful to see your teaching practice black and white on a video recorder. And I don't mean actually black and white, like it's in color. I was video recorded a lot when I was pregnant with my third child. I was doing some work with children who have autism, and I was video recorded, making sure that the techniques that I was taught, I was putting into practice with children. It was really hard to see what I look like very pregnant doing that, and it was very hard to see when I would make mistakes, but it was really, really helpful to change those mistakes by seeing what had happened before. And you can get that a lot more on an hour or 2 hours video recorded. It's fairly easy now, and we have phones. We had an actual video recorder, and sometimes it would break, and we would always finish it up on our phones as well. It can't always take a lot. We would break it into like 10-minute segments, things like that, and then put it all together on the computer. But a small video recording system is not very expensive, and it hooks right up to laptops as well. I think that it needs to be systematic, and as you are talking through the observation with that person, it needs to assess the needs. So what are their vulnerabilities? What does a novice student need to work on? But it also has to be a poop sandwich. So you need to start with the strength. Oh, I love that you did this. Your lesson plan was fantastic. Then the need that they need to work on, typically no more than 3, and then a strength as well. So I love how you said goodbye to little Johnny's parents. They just left so happy that he's making such progress in learning and understanding and working with his friends, something like that. But I think observations are really important. Typically, as you're debriefing somebody and you're doing that poop sandwich of a strength, some needs that they need to work on, and strengths again, it typically should be private. So you're not doing it in front of other teachers, and a time to go over the observations and the ways to use their current practice and take it to the next step through professional development. So I would like to see you do this. Does that sound good to you? And maybe they'll say, no, I don't, that's not what I think I need in the classroom. And then maybe you can compromise. Well, let's work on this and that. And then once again, what do you need from me? So what can I put in my book? How can I help you? Do I need to order you something special from Lakeshore so that you have the materials you need? Do I need to print out something from NIAC, which is a online National Association for the Education of Young Children. It's online. It's also an accrediting body, but they have fantastic resources. So do I need to print something for you about biting and how biting happens in classrooms and how we can support each other? And then once again, when I'm bringing this up, this is kind of my coaching log or a plan of action or just a next steps that are very seen, written down, and objective. Up on Canvas this week, I have a PDF example of a coaching log, which I'm more than happy to share with you. So if you want to print it, you can use it, or you can just have notebooks like I've been showing you, or some people like to do Excel spreadsheets or Google calendars. There's a lot of different ways, but something that you have an objective next step to support the teacher and for this teacher to achieve these next steps in order to change our professional practice. How do we evaluate progress in the relationship? And page 53 in the textbook is a really great example of this as well. But I need to see, is there evidence, is there solid proof that I supported a teacher's ability to understand their values and beliefs about teaching, because we all have different philosophies, we all have different backgrounds, we all have different knowledge, and how we put that into practice is our values and beliefs about teaching. How do we think children learn? We also need to see if we supported a teacher's ability to understand that they have impact and they need to be accountable in their teaching practice. So you have impact on families and children. You need to be accountable to them. You need to be accountable to your coworkers that you work with every day. And you have a larger scope than you actually think. A lot of times teachers think, oh, I'm not doing that much. No, you have tremendous scope. You are shaping the next generation. You are supporting these children who are learning and growing their minds so tremendously in the first 5 years. All of those neural connections are happening when they're first little children. We have to support that by showing the teachers their scope in the classroom. Then we also need to make sure that we develop a variety of teaching practices and support that as well. So especially for novice and advanced beginners, they need a lot of tools in their tool kit or their tool belt. They need to have all of those ways that they have teaching practice and support them as a learner in understanding teaching practice and being able to put it into the classroom as well. So your mentor might have a different way of learning. You need to support how they learn so that they can take those parts of things that you're trying to teach them and apply it to their classroom. Also, as a mentor, you can ask them in what ways did the work of professional development help them to know and build trust with the teacher, to understand the boundaries of the relationship. So you might want to ask them, do you know our relationship? Like, you know, I'm your supervisor, or, you know, I'm a private mentor that doesn't have anything to do with your job or standing. You might want to clarify that they understand the relationship. They need to learn about themselves. They need to learn about their goals. They need to be flexible when they're implementing things. And that can be hard for a novice and an advanced beginner. They don't have a lot of flexibility, but teaching is all about change and implementation. They might, by learning to be flexible with you in professional development and change how they teach, that will allow them to be more flexible in the classroom as well. Then we also need to make sure that the teachers feel that they were encouraged and supported. And then also sometimes you need to challenge them, typically through open-ended questions or open-ended discussions. So you did this in the classroom. Do you think that it was successful for the child or not? So in a formal observation or video recording, you can say, hey, look, these are the things that you did. Do you think that was successful? Why or why not? And through that, maybe challenge some of the beliefs that they have about their own teaching practice. You do really need to be aware of, and we've touched on cultural competency a lot, but that's part of the mismatch. So sometimes there can be cultural differences in how we learn, how we process, and how we articulate what we learn as well. So knowing the culture of the person that you're working with, knowing where they're coming from, and being able to bridge that culture. You might need to ask them, how do you learn? How do you want to be spoken to? That should be part of that code or that written, mutually agreed upon code of conduct at the very beginning. Asking them, hey, how's it going? Like, I see that you learn in this specific way. Can you tell me more about that? Because I really want to support you in learning, and I'd like to learn more about how you learn. You also need to make sure, especially when you're talking about the boundaries of the relationship, that you reassert kind of that there's some authority differences within this relationship. Even if you're an independent coach or mentor that has nothing to do with the job standing of the teacher, you still have somewhat a role of authority in that you're the person that has the knowledge and skills that this person wants to emulate. You are modeling for them. So there is somewhat of an authority, and you can never kind of violate the trust that that person places into you, and you always have to be appropriate and professional with them. So in conclusion, I love professional development. I think setting up systems for it is really, really, really important. I think that it allows us to achieve our vision and our goals, and also to make sure that our teachers are getting better and better. We also want to make sure that it's active and it's engaging, and you're supporting learners through the development of both themselves as teacher, and of their quality teaching practice as well. So that's a lot, and I hope through these last couple of slides that I've given you some concrete ways that you can think about the practice of teaching skills, and also the practice of professional development, and ways that you can start it off, how you can engage in it, how you can observe it, and how you can evaluate it as well. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks so much, and I will see you guys online.